ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Geneva Williams.
2 years ago, I was just getting home from a trip, and my younger sister Janelle calls and says, "Gigi, Daddy's gone." I had just gone to New Jersey to give him the final manuscript of a book he and I had been working on together. I wanted to write the book because Ermin Jones was my hero. He wanted to write the book for historical reasons. He would always say, "Gigi, we've got to tell the stories so that young folks would have a game plan for making change in the community." My dad was a fearless civil rights leader who lived, worked, and helped shape a small town on the Jersey Shore called Neptune. So I had decided that the best way to tell his story was through conversations between him and me. I'd turn on the recorder, set up the mic, and we'd talk for hours. He in a special spot on his favorite couch, me sitting across from him in my favorite red chair that we had brought together on a shopping trip. It was slow going at first because of the heartache. His college sweetheart and wife of 66 years, Blanche, my mom, died in 2014. In 2015, my husband, we had 40 unbelievably awesome years of marriage, died. Otha. My dad and I shared the loss of our spouses. Grief was all around us, but time was not on our side. Dad was turning 92, so we had to press on, alone, yet together. Besides, he had told everybody in town, "Gigi's writing a book about me." So I had just gone back to give him this manuscript, and I wanted to know what his thoughts were about it. A few days later, he has trouble breathing, and he's rushed to emergency. And while I'm talking to the doctors on the phone, he grabs the phone and says, and ignoring my cries about, "Are you all right?" he says, "Gigi, I read the book. It's good, good, it's good." In that instant, I know that he knows the end is near. And he's telling me his story is complete. Go tell it. Honor him. And it is good. Now, I could have written my dad's story just by walking into my parents' home and transcribing the words from all the plaques and certificates all along the wall, or in reading the hundreds and hundreds of newspaper articles about him. But I didn't need those things to get lessons. I remember I was in middle school in history class. Now, I can't remember the exact textbook images, but they're derogatory about black people, and I'm uncomfortable. So I go home to my parents and tell them and complain. My dad's sitting in his favorite chair, reading a newspaper. My mom's sitting over at the dining room table, writing a note to her sister. They stop, listen, and then my dad says, without even consulting with my mom, "Tomorrow, Gigi, your mother and I want you to go back to school and tell the teacher how you feel." And then they continue doing what they're doing. What? Me front off the teacher? but I'm really sweating because I'm worried about what the other kids are going to say about me. So I yell, "I can't do that." My dad puts down the paper, looks up, calm, says, "Gigi, yes, you can, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to speak up for what you believe is right. So go ahead and do it, and it'll be all right." Well, I'm scared. But you know, fear has a way of disappearing when something more important shows up, like my parents wanting me to do what they said for me to do. So I go back to school the next day, scared, go into class, raise my hand, and in a shaky voice, speak my piece. And to my amazement, my teacher listens. In fact, asks me questions, and we engage in conversation. And then after school, some of my friends tell me I was cool. I was scared. I spoke up, and it was all right. Like the time Daddy told me about his interview with a 2-star general for this highly placed job in the government that he wanted very badly. But the general kept jugging him, kept harassing him about, because he couldn't understand how my dad could do a good job for him at the fort and at the same time continue to work in the community with the NAACP. So my dad told him, "General, I'm going to be the very best person you would have ever hired for this job and do the best that I can. But when my tour of duty is over during the day, I'm going right back to the community and do my best for my people." The general hired him. The general respected my dad, and so did others. I was young when I heard this knock on the door and opened it, and 3 men, 3 garbage men in their uniforms stood there, hats in hand, asking to speak to Mr. Jones. I yelled, "Mom, Dad." My dad comes down the hallway, sees them, tells them to come on in and have a seat. Now, I can't wait till, wow, Mom sees them sitting on her furniture in their uniforms. She's in the kitchen. She comes out, smiles, and invites them to sit down too. I'm stunned. They remain standing, however, hats still in hand, and they begin to tell my dad about how black sanitation workers weren't treated the same that white workers were. They didn't have the same advancement opportunities, the same vacation schedules, and all black workers could do was to pick up the trash. They never drove the trucks. And they told them everyone said to come see Mr. Jones. He'll know what to do. My dad just sat there listening, nodding, and told our guest, "I'll look into it." So he tells me, I go to the city officials and they ignore me and they deny me meetings when I ask them for a review of the sanitation department. So I suggested to them that there may be litter and trash on the streets come Labor Day. He laughs. Soon enough, and before Labor Day, we have an agreement. Black workers now have the same advancement opportunities, the same vacation schedules, and they have different jobs and they can drive the trucks, things blacks in the sanitation department never had before. My dad helped make those same changes with school teachers, firefighters, and he helped dismantle racial segregation in the schools. He attracted admirers and invited haters. I remember so often the hate mail, the anonymous phone calls, the Klan-style crosses on our lawns. Dad reminds me, I was at a meeting about desegregating the schools, and during a short recess, a man comes up to me and says, "Ermin, if you continue to do what you're doing, you won't be around for long." I asked my dad, "Well, what did you do?" He said, "I didn't do anything." He said, "I just walked away." The threats, death threats, violence, all those things, I never did much about them except told your mom. I just took it as the price to pay for civil rights leadership during those days. My dad's quiet yet determined leadership showed up on the basketball court. He was 6'3", slender, and good looking. The media called him the lanky colored center. He was the only black player on the team, and he led his undefeated team to the state championships for the first time ever in the history of that small town. But his shiny stardom still got him rejected, even with a degree in his hand. He told me, "You know, my dream was to be a coach and athletic director, and after graduating from Morgan State University, he went on to get his master's, and he said I needed to student teach. So I figured, no problem. I'll go to my hometown. Everybody knows me there. I was a star baller." But he was amazed and his hopes were dashed when the school superintendent told him, "Ermin, we don't put colored teachers in the high school." I asked him, "Well, what did you say? What did you think?" He said, "It was unbelievable that they would do that to me." We both sit and think and shake our heads. And I look around the walls and say, "Well, Dad, it is unbelievable, but you know what really is ironic? That the town that you fought for social justice in, the town that rejected you often, years later inducted you into the Neptune Hall of Fame. And because of your lifetime of service in the town, declared October 20th as Ermin K. Jones Day." He smiles and says, "Yeah, I do appreciate the contributions that people recognize now that I made. So I can't wait. That's just my segue into the next question. So I say, Dad, what's the greatest contribution you ever made to civil rights?" Oh, shucks, he leans back. I know the story that's coming. He says, "You were 10 years old. It was in June, on a Sunday afternoon in 1969. Me and your mom go to fill out an application to move into this gorgeous, beautiful, newly developed housing area. The sales agent on the phone said, 'Come on down. We got plenty of applications.' But when we got there, none were there, nor for the several times later that we went. Finally, we go back again. This time, I take my pastor with me, who asks, 'Why can't you build a home for Mr. Jones?' The salesman shakes his head and says, 'The developer does not build houses for Negroes.'" Now, I've heard this story 100 times, but this is the first time I ask him, "Dad, take me to that moment when you were told that? What did you feel? He said, I couldn't believe it. I was raised in this town, went to the schools, was a star athlete. I was a soldier serving America. I remembered the lost dreams I had of coaching, and I thought about the unfairness of it all, and I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore. He goes on to say, the media reported it as big news all over the state that a Negro was suing to move into a white neighborhood. He said the calls started again, the threats. There were petitions circulated all over. Even some of my former teammates were involved in trying to keep me out. Other than a small group of friends and family, especially your Uncle Varn, me and your mom felt alone. 3 years later, the New Jersey Supreme Court ruled unanimously in my parents' favor. In a landmark housing discrimination decision, the judges told the developer, build Mr. Jones his home. I asked my dad, how did you feel at that moment? He said, oh, the joy of it. He said, we were so happy. I reached over and grabbed your mom. We couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. He said, I'm an ordinary man. Just doing an ordinary thing. I said, no, an extraordinary thing, Dad. We laughed, and then tears came into his eyes, and he said, Gigi, you know, I couldn't have done it without your mom. It was impossible. We worked together. He said, early in our marriage, we fought to get her a teaching job, and she became the first Black elementary school teacher in Neptune. And back then, we made a pact early on in our marriage that what we would do would be to work together to help others fight for social justice. We're quiet for a moment in the memory of Mom. Then I asked the question that I've really wanted to know all this time. Why? Why would you, a lanky colored center, fight for social justice, face death threats and violence? Why? He looked at me without a blink and said, because I wanted you and your sister to say, this is what my daddy did. I wanted you and your sister to know why you are who you are. So I'm on the phone listening to my sister crying, and I know that here comes grief again. My daddy, my hero, is gone. I'm sad, yet satisfied, because I know why I am who I am. Yeah. I didn't pick up the book for a year after my daddy passed. I couldn't do it. My husband, my mom, my daddy, it was too much. The grief was overwhelming. my parents, my friends, and would say to me, how's that book coming? And people in Neptune would say, whatever happened to that book that your daddy said you were writing about him? It was my editor who got me going. He said, you've got to pick out a couple of quotes for the beginning of the book that capture the essence of your dad and are said by someone he loves. So I'm strolling through this long list of quotes, and I gasp. I say, oh, there it is. I see the words that inspire me, the words that get me to take a deep breath, pull my big girl pants on, and move forward to finish my daddy's book. And they're words by my daddy's greatest hero. In his inaugural address, Barack Obama said, let it be said that our children's children knew when we were tested, we did not turn back. That we carried the gift of freedom, safely forward and delivered it to future generations. The book is at the publisher to be released any day now. The story of how my daddy ignited, changed, and won will be delivered. I'm satisfied, and it is good. Thank you.
Dr. Geneva Williams, ladies and gentlemen.